tilting it home.
For Virgil Booth, physical therapy has replaced the 2 packs of cigarettes a day he used to smoke. It had to, or Virgil would have died. Besides the therapy, a portable oxygen kit is at his side, filling his diseased lungs with the much-needed air he can't breathe on his own.
On my hands, now big breath, and let it out through your mouth.
Though it took an emphysema-related heart attack to make him stop smoking, Virgil Booth thinks he's lucky.
But I never did nothing about it. I just ignored the fact that the doctor told me I had emphysema, and I kept on smoking and doing my thing. If I would have paid attention when I was first diagnosed, how much better off I think I would have been now. And how much better off I am now by doing what my doctor and nurse tells me to do. So, because when I got here, I couldn't do nothing. I couldn't walk 5 feet.
Dr. William Cook says Mr. Booth was able to give up smoking, and that helped his chances, but others aren't as fortunate.
It's one of the top 10 killers, and I bet you probably one of the top 5 killers in the United States. It's harder, though, to put your finger on emphysema as a killer, because frequently people experience deterioration in their ability and their lifestyle, and then their final cause of death may not be emphysema. It may be the heart attack that they had while they were debilitated, or the pneumonia that was in on top of their emphysema, and their pneumonia may be called their cause of death, when a person that didn't have emphysema would have survived the pneumonia. I think 90% of Americans today, when surveyed, or something like that, understand that cigarette smoking is probably harmful to them. So convincing them that it's harmful, it's something that's been done by educational media already. But getting them to stop frequently is another problem, because cigarette smoking isn't just a question of understanding it intellectually. You also have to overcome the physical addiction that occurs with cigarette smoking.
The golden years, the time to sit back and harvest all the fruits a lifetime has produced. And for many, old age is just another adventure to live for. But for others, old age can become a nightmare. One nightmare ended here at South Community Hospital. On January 22nd, the hospital admitted 72-year-old Margaret Gibbs. Partially paralyzed, she'd been living with her son and his wife. Medical officials say by the time Mrs. Gibbs reached the emergency room, she was already in grave condition. She was starving, covered with large bed sores and her own excrement, and Mrs. Gibbs died the next day. The son and daughter-in-law of Margaret Gibbs have been charged with second-degree murder in her death. Now, this may be the first time in the state's history murder charges have been filed because of elderly neglect. District Attorney Bob Macy believes it's going to take better laws to keep the number of neglect cases from rising.
There's no criminal sanction for failing to take care of the elderly. There's no legal responsibility upon a person to care for his parents, for instance. And I think this is wrong. I think that your parents care for you when you're young. I think it's your obligation to care for them when they're old and can't care for themselves. However, that's not the state of the law.
But there are laws that allow the welfare department to step in and help, and Kay McSpadden and Carrie Garland have worked with elderly abuse since 1977, and they say the problem is growing.
Elderly people in many instances, make a decision to put up with whatever their family chooses to give them, because it is attention from that family.
I think we will become more aware of it. 10 years ago, you never heard of it. People were ashamed, didn't know who to notify, and now it is becoming known there is an Adult Protective Service law. We're not ashamed of it. It's something that is real, and a lot of people are taking note of this.
Abortion. It's become a common procedure legalized through a 1973 Supreme Court ruling, but it's also a controversial issue. Up to now, the federal government has been paying for abortions for women on welfare, but in yesterday's vote, the Senate moved to block those payments, and it makes no difference if the person is a victim of rape or incest.
They would be forced to continue that pregnancy, to have a child, and for most of the women who under these circumstances would not have access to monies for an abortion, they would also be unprepared financially to care for that child. So that it would be sort of giving a new person over to subsidies. Some women never recover from a rape. And to compound that with an unwanted pregnancy would just be devastating, I think, for a woman.
Lawrence believes the state could take up where the federal government is leaving off, but considering the political climate, it's not likely. Susie Webb, Action 4.
Dozens of flags were placed on the graves of veterans at the Memorial Park Cemetery. Relatives made an appearance, most of them with flowers.
Those men and women are worthy of far greater recognition than mere words or markers.
But for those who may not have had someone nearby to remember them, a larger memorial was held by V.F.W. 1857, as local posts are doing throughout the state on this, the nation's 113th Memorial Day. That first day was for veterans who died in their own land during the Civil War.
Order, arm. Firing squad, assume firing position. Fire. Present, arm.
The ceremonies and flowers are the symbols for a day of reflections on those who put their flag before their lives. Ted Brown, Action 4.
This is the Manuel Perez Army Reserve Center in western Oklahoma City. Now, the name Perez may not be familiar to many Oklahomans, but Perez is honored each Memorial Day as being the only Oklahoma City native ever to have won the nation's highest military medal, the Congressional Medal of Honor.
And in honoring Manuel Perez Jr., we honor also all those men and women who have proven their love for God and country.
On each of the past 6 Memorial Days, a service such as this one has taken place at Fairlawn Cemetery. A small crowd gathers around the grave of Private Manuel Perez to pay homage to a man who paid the ultimate price for his country. On February 13th of 1945, Private Perez single-handedly killed 18 Japanese soldiers while knocking out a strongly fortified enemy position. 1 month and 1 day later, a sniper's bullet took the young man's life.
Ready? Aim. Fire.
Citing his bravery, Congress awarded its Medal of Honor to Manuel Perez 6 months after his death. Now each Memorial Day, his fellow veterans pay their respects to a man born in Oklahoma City who courageously fought for his country and then died halfway around the world so that others could be free. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at Fairlawn Cemetery.
There's nothing quite like an outdoor picnic with good friends, family, and food to start off the summer season right. But when you combine the food with the warmer temperatures, you have to be careful. That potato salad and fried chicken can hide bacteria that not only spoils the food, it can spoil your good times.
Generally, the symptoms of food poisoning start out with generalized nausea and a general feeling of ill health, shortly thereafter followed by vomiting, and in most cases diarrhea.
What's the difference between food poisoning and a virus?
A lot of times it's impossible to tell the difference.
Well, the summer picnics can be a lot of fun, but they can be spoiled if you do get food poisoning. You need to remember there are several kinds of food poisoning, some more serious than others. So if you experience all the symptoms but aren't better in a day or two, that's when you need to see the doctor. For Medical Matters, Susie Webb, Action 4. Dr. Fletcher Taylor heads up the Oklahoma branch of the American Heart Association, and he says his group doesn't condone the use of the blood pressure machines for anything other than amusement.
It may be a fascinating toy or tool for stimulating interest, but if you want to know what's really going on in terms of accurate blood pressure readings, I don't think you can rely, and I don't think the Heart Association is very strong about this, that you can rely on a commercial tool that's not calibrated monthly or weekly.
To find out just how close the machines are to controlled readings, I asked Dr. Taylor to take my blood pressure. Because blood pressure changes every time it's taken, I had him come up with 3 different readings. Then I went to the coin-operated machine.
95/70.
Instructions on the machine say you need to hold your arm up for 30 seconds and open and close your fist. This I did. Then I put my arm in the cuff. I put in the money and started the machine. The cuff automatically closes around your arm and fits very snugly. It's all computer operated. Then all you do is wait. It takes from 50 to 70 seconds for the machine to read your blood pressure and tell you the results. The controlled readings were 90/70, 95/70, and 98/70. The machine readings were just a little higher, with the last reading of 95/72 very close to the controlled ones. This is a typical warm weather scene, kids hiking through Martin Nature Park. Each year, thousands of Oklahomans march off through the lush green parks and woods across the state, and many unknowingly walk right into trouble, poison ivy. Greg Jensen and Richard Ray both know what poison ivy can do. Greg's leg is still infected with poison he got more than a week ago while fishing, and for the both of them, it's no fun.
It's hard to sleep because the stuff that I'm using just gives me about 2 hours relief. And I'll wake up at 4 and then just have to put it on and then go back. And during the sleep, you really itch it, but you don't know it, and that's how it spreads a lot. He can't sleep very well, and it's really annoying. You get pretty ugly at school, too. Say, hey, what happened to you, kid?
People would avoid poison ivy if they knew what it looked like. That's one of the main problems. Well, naturalist Doug Week says there's a simple way to remember the plant.
If you can imagine a person, you can kind of remember poison ivy real well. Just like people, it has 2 hands, and on the hands, the thumbs, right here, point away from the center leaf. Just on both hands here. And on the center leaf, it has 2 ears, one on each side, and a big old fat nose in the front. Now, poison ivy has pointed leaves. Each bump on the leaf is very pointed. On poison oak, the leaves are more rounded. They're not as pointy as that. There's always 3 leaves in a cluster, and the center of the 3 leaves is always just a little bit of red. And that's one real good way to tell.
Another way to recognize poison ivy and oak are the white berries that grow on each plant. Now, if you think you've recognized the plant too late, you need to wash off the area as soon as possible. That'll help get rid of some of the poisonous oil. And if small blisters do appear, use a recommended lotion to help stop the itching and keep it from spreading. And if your skin does start swelling, you then need to see a doctor. Each day at the City County Health Department, patient slides are checked to find any traces of venereal disease. More and more evidence is cropping up indicating chlamydia, a disease that acts like gonorrhea but is harder to detect. And some experts believe that nationally this disease may bypass gonorrhea as the #1 venereal disease. Dr. Everett Rhodes says chlamydia isn't something to be ignored by the public. It's just that right now there's not a lot known about this form of VD.
In many, many instances, you cannot really look at an individual and say this is gonorrhea on the one hand, or this is nonspecific urethritis on the other, or chlamydia. The physician should make a smear, should take the material, look at it under the microscope, and most times can make a fairly specific diagnosis of gonorrhea or not gonorrhea. You cannot make a specific diagnosis of chlamydia infection under usual circumstances because very elaborate laboratory techniques are required to grow it and identify it. It has become, in the last decade or so, a prominent cause of venereal disease.
More than 20% of Oklahoma City's workforce is employed here on the west side of town. Now, that's meant problems if there have been on-the-job accidents because the nearest medical facilities are 5 miles away. Beginning next week, that situation is going to change with the opening of this medical clinic. It's designed to handle industrial cases. Inside, the clinic is set up with a lot of things most other health facilities would have, though they have special equipment to handle certain types of on-the-job accidents. The clinic also has an x-ray room and a physical therapy setup. But the major difference in this clinic is the philosophy behind the health care. It's designed to serve the employer and cut his health costs.
The employers are responsible for the health care of employees while they're on the job. And what we've designed and structured here is a facility to reduce the medical expense involved in caring for those employees. When you're serving the employer, what you're really doing is serving that employee because you're giving him an extra dimension of care to get him back to work and productive as quickly as possible, as rapidly as possible.
Are you ready? Okay, blow.
Matthew says the idea behind the clinic is not only to treat the patients, but it's to work with them to prevent both accidents and illnesses. Matthew says the doctor and his staff will be taking part in education programs to train the industrial workers on how to make their jobs safer. For Medical Matters, Susie Webb, Action 4. Latest scramble began in late February when local hospitals began using newspaper, radio, and TV to advertise for badly needed nurses. 4 months later, hospitals like Mercy Health Center have filled their need for staff nurses. They've used pay increases and more flexible hours to lure the nurses back to work. In fact, Mercy now has a waiting list of people wanting to get a position. Well, while this is being repeated across the city, the nursing shortage crisis is far from over.
Definitely, I think it's a temporary situation. Hopefully it can be managed to where we won't be in the same situation we were this past spring. But nursing has always had a problem, and the nursing shortage is not an acute problem, it's a chronic problem.
The chronic shortage is being treated with a series of new nursing programs. At Presbyterian Hospital, nursing student Ann Bullock is getting to work with veteran Rosemary Duncan in an extern program. This program is designed to help the young nurse better adjust to the real world of hospital care. It's just an example of the kinds of efforts hospitals are making to get and keep their nurses.
I think 6 months from now we'll see the same kind of shortage again. The nursing externship program that you're going to be looking at is our attempt to make that transition from the academic to the hospital setting, because we recognize how difficult it is to come from the academic into the pressure points, and especially when they're put on an afternoon or night shift. Afternoon shifts are just about as busy as day shifts today. So it's a big stress and strain, and the nursing externship program is one method, and others that we are attempting to make that transition easier for them.
Tamara Meadows has had hepatitis for about 3 weeks. She hasn't been able to work for that time, fearing she'd give it to someone else. As a nurse, she's known about the liver disease, but she didn't really think much about it until she started having some unusual symptoms.
Very tired, and just didn't feel like doing anything, didn't feel like eating anything. The first 2 or 3 days I ran a low-grade fever, just ached all over. Real bad. Had a dull pain in the upper right side of my stomach, and just basically tired.
Liver specialist Dr. Jack Welch says viral hepatitis is more prevalent than most people think. He believes a lot of people can have the symptoms and never link them to hepatitis.
Some people will have absolutely no jaundice, and it's kind of a flu-like syndrome. They may have abdominal pain, they may have nausea, they may have a decrease in appetite. They may even have a cough, looking a lot like a flu. Then many other people get jaundiced. So that's what you usually recognize is the yellow color of their eyes or skin or darkening of their urine. And these people may have more severe symptoms, all the way up to death.
Dr. Welch adds that treatment for the disease has changed.
The studies that were done on this during World War II and somewhat after that time, they did confine people to bed for long periods of time, and they did have special diets. But all the studies since then have shown that really doesn't make any difference.
Into this artificial kidney with your heartbeat. And you say that when the wearable artificial kidney becomes available to the kidney patient, it will mean mobility for them and a chance to go on vacations and spend more time with their families. Right now, a dialysis patient has to spend 3 days a week, 4 to 6 hours a day at a dialysis center for these life-saving treatments. But with the wearable artificial kidney, they will have more mobility.
How soon do you think this will be on the market?
We're looking at possibly about 5 years. We still need FDA approval and a company to manufacture all the components.
Thousands of infants and young children in the Third World have severe infections, diarrhea, and malnutrition from infant formula. Hundreds have died. The formula itself is not the problem. It's the way the product is used. Mothers often mix the powdered formula with contaminated water, place it in unsanitary containers, or try to save money and dilute the powder too much. Breastfeeding is healthier and cheaper, but slick formula salesmen keep pushing their products, and some salesmen even dress up as doctors. Mothers don't understand what they're doing wrong, why their baby is sick or dying. All Mom tried to do was keep up with the Western world. Well, things are a bit different in the Western world. Hospitals are super sterile, and so is the formula fed to newborns. It's a full, complete diet, more convenient, and in these conditions, more sterile than breastfeeding. A sterile environment makes the difference between formula that's good for your baby and formula which carries disease, and for some, even death.
If it's not sterile, milk, which is a good culture media for bacteria to grow, will become contaminated, and the baby may develop an infection with diarrhea because of the contamination of the milk, either the milk itself or the bottle it's in or the nipple that is used to feed the baby. They lose a lot of fluid when they have diarrhea, and babies have relatively more fluid than adults do, and they get so dehydrated and so overwhelmed by the infection that it often causes them to have to be hospitalized and need intravenous feedings, and can cause serious problems.
Western world mothers take sterility for granted. The home environment here is usually more sanitary than the shanty towns of the Third World. With pre-sterilized bottles, nipples, and formulas, Mom can be sure her baby's getting pure, sanitary nourishment.